And we are live, and it is being recorded at this time.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I will call the meeting to order and ask our recording secretary, Ms. Cleary, if you could call the roll, please.
Councilmember Sawyer,
Here.
Councilmember Alvarez,
Present.
Councilmember Fleming, Councilmember Fleming.
Here.
Oh, thank you. Let the record reflect that all members are present.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And members of the public may view and listen to the meeting as noted on the city's website and as noted on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to speak during item 3, public comment, or during the public hearing items will be able to do so by utilizing the raise hand feature, their hand, or sorry, typo, or pressing number 9 on their note. The wording can be adjusted, but not the content. That was a special message to me. I think we've covered that this is all covered under the Brown Act, and it does offer an ability of the public to weigh in on items on our agenda.
And just for clarity, Councilmember Chair Sawyer, it's if you're joining by phone, it's *9.
*9. Thank you. That's my glasses. Not number 9. *9. And excuse me. And we have already taken the roll. Public comments. Is there anyone who'd like to address the subcommittee on items not on the agenda?
There are no hands raised at this time.
All right, thank you very much. So then we will move on to the agenda, and with new business, the 3.1. Ms. De La Rosa, would you like to introduce that item?
Yeah. So I thought what I'd do, since this is our second meeting of the Economic Development Subcommittee, and we had been meeting for, I think, a year. With the Economic Recovery Task Force, I thought it would be helpful to go over where we were with the task force, so we can talk about efforts that we've been doing, and how we used the task force, how we talked about next steps, or what the council members, or the subcommittee rather, are interested in, how we accept new items to consider. We had such a great task force. I think we were able to be both responsive to the pandemic, but also continue to move forward on other council priorities. So that's just, I was just going to go through that, and then maybe we could have a discussion about what you'd like to see brought forward here, how we want to have these discussions now that we're a Brown Act committee versus the task force. So next slide, please, Eileen. So we had a very long list of things that we put onto our Economic Recovery Task Force. We accepted anything, any idea from anywhere throughout the entirety of when we met. By the time we ended that task force in December, it's culled down to what you'll see on these next 2 slides. And we basically had prioritized efforts and parking lot efforts. What we were able to accomplish is pretty much seen on this slide. They're ongoing programs, but I'll go through them. So actually, Councilmember Alvarez, just before you joined, the council gave us authorized $2 million for a child care support pilot program. That we've started the first phase of that pilot program, which is a cash infusion just to try to get to retain as many child care businesses as we could to the other side of the pandemic. And then the second phase was to expand capacity and get more facilities built within Santa Rosa. So what happened with this one, if you'll recall, is that we've lost almost 50% of our child care businesses in Santa Rosa. The majority of child care is done through family home care. Whether it's licensed or unlicensed, the registered child care providers mostly in Santa Rosa are mostly out of the home, and they're where we have the most capacity. And so the stabilizing business part of it came from grants that we're running through First Five, as well as we've doubled the number of training slots that Four Cs provides. And so we just sort of did a pass through of about $600,000 to these two nonprofits to be able to stabilize the businesses. What's coming next, and we've only just started to have this conversation, is what does this next phase look like with the rest of the money, the $1.5 million? And I'd like to keep this task force as the primary task force through which we sort of vet these ideas as we develop this program. What we're looking to do is bring in more partners from the outside to leverage the funds. With grants, it's sort of you use it and then that program is done. And we want to see how we can expand the remaining $1.5 million that we have in the program so that it sort of regenerates itself, or we can eke it out as long as we possibly can. Are there any questions?
I know it's highly unusual for somebody like for a panelist to jump in here, but I just want to, can I just add a couple of things?
Yeah, actually, it would be super helpful if you guys jump in throughout this whole thing. Yeah.
You know, first of all, Eddie, just for your edification, is like, this is perhaps like the thing that has happened on council that I'm most proud of, that I feel like is the biggest win-win-win for both business, the business community, families, children. It's an intergenerational, like cross-sector anti-poverty program that helps women and women of color and in particular. And it's just something that I'm really excited about. And my greatest hope is that it doesn't just end up being this one and done type of thing, but that, you know, as the pandemic allows and as, you know, we move out of that, that this is somehow like something that we can expand to become more of a regional effort and something that other jurisdictions partner with us, and maybe we're able to get more funding from philanthropic organizations. Because there is, you know, the Chamber of Commerce has been doing a lot on childcare for a long time. And I know there's some interest, you know, with Supervisor Hopkins around this stuff. So I'm hopeful that we can take this on the road, that we can garner more support, and that this is not just the beginning of something in our community, but the beginning of a municipal movement toward, because one of the things that's, you know, takes forever is like building housing, and we should do that. You know, repairing roads, we should do that. But the second, you know, biggest economic driver after housing is childcare, and it can largely be mobilized very quickly with the right investments. And so I hope my excitement is not too overwhelming, but I just wanted to put an exclamation point on this one and thank Raisa for her awesome leadership on this, and John for sharing my vision. And I just can't wait to see what happens.
And this might be a question for the city attorney, not to put City Attorney Burke on the spot, but you know, what we did so well in the task force is it was a sort of a working group. And if we're looking to get county involvement or to understand how this is rolled out in the community, it's interesting to me what roles you guys play in that, and through a subcommittee, can we do that? Can there be, because of all of our items, it's this one where if we want to leverage the funds, we need access to, you know, understanding what the county is doing, and that might be elected to elected. So Councilmember Fleming, I don't know, or Sawyer, having worked on this one with us in the past, do you see, is there a role for the subcommittee to play actively in this item in particular? And if so, how do you see that, assuming that that's allowed through a subcommittee?
Well, I think it's a good question because, you know, education, understanding the value, understanding the necessity, understanding the needs of not only the children. I mean, this affects in a positive way. So it's at so many levels. And the one thing that I needed was education. And at the same time that we're hearing it discussed nationally, we're hearing it discussed locally. And I'm wondering if we have gaps that need to be filled in education, and where are the supervisors when it comes to this topic? And I think ascertaining their positions could help us as more regionally because it is a regional issue. And I think that we need to look at anything that we do, just like we look through a climate change lens. I think that as we make decisions in this subcommittee, that we look through that very important lens of childcare and making sure that we're not reversing course and losing the ground that we have gained in this topic. So it probably once we determine some good questions and to ask our county comrades, that we do make some kind of contact with them and find out if there are areas that we can support them or they can support us while we work through the challenges to childcare in this county, and specifically in Santa Rosa. So I think it's something we need to be aware of. But for me, there was a fairly steep learning curve in understanding the importance, because I don't have children, and so I don't understand some of those challenges, but I certainly understand them now, thanks to Councilwoman Fleming. It's really been a interesting journey for me. And I'm hoping that, and I think that the full council seems to understand the value and the necessity of being very mindful of childcare in our city. And I think that looking at how the county is viewing it, will be very, very important for us as we move forward.
I agree with you, John. Councilmember Sawyer. I think that we can all, dig in, and, I think if we reach out to our supervisors, and, the ones who aren't our supervisors too, but if we talk to them as a group, not only will we be able to get their positions, but if they hear from a few of us, they'll also, it will be more on their minds as they go into their year and set their priorities. The other thing that I'm wondering is, if there's a way for us to share our enthusiasm and our experience with other groups as those opportunities come available. If there's Rotary clubs or other chambers of commerce around the area or anything like that. Raisa, I don't know if you could keep an eye on stuff like that so that we could speak with them and share our passion for this, because I think there's kind of nothing like having, here I am with two guys without kids who are fully on board, right? So both business owners from different communities within Santa Rosa. So I think that we have a powerful message to share if we can get in front of some folks.
And I think, okay, so that helps. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Alvarez, were you going to speak?
Well, I was just going to really just support the comments that have been made by my fellow council members. And you stated very clearly, as business people, as two men without children, we definitely understand the importance that childcare represents to our economy as a whole. For myself, for my employees that do have children, especially pre-COVID and now hopefully post-COVID, the importance of childcare is absolutely vital to not only the family structure, but our local economy as well. So you definitely have my support, and I do appreciate the proactiveness that my fellow council members took to address the issue of childcare. And now during the pandemic, and now as we hopefully see the light, even more so. So I definitely appreciate their efforts that have been put forth.
And there was, I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. There's something that we need to make sure that we don't lose track of. COVID has helped us put a very bright light on childcare, because for a number of reasons. And once that bright light on COVID starts to dim somewhat, we need to make sure that we keep that bright light shining still on childcare. And there are bright lights shining on other issues as well that will continue post-COVID. But this is one of those that could easily lose some of its attention once parents go back to work for a variety of reasons. So we will I think it will be really important that we keep this in front of our councils and keep it in front of our county partners, because we could easily start to lose ground as the necessity might possibly start to wane a little bit, at least the perception that it's no longer as necessary as it was before. So we have some work to do in making sure that it stays in front of the stays on the A list for issues to be aware of.
And to your point, John, sorry, Councilmember Sawyer.
You know what? I'm fine with John. I mean, what I'm not sure about is protocol of whether we have to call each other by our titles.
I don't think we have to. I think for the purpose of the subcommittee, if you can use my first name, I'm comfortable with.
Thank you. How about you, Eddie?
I'm gonna go.
Okay, we'll just keep it that way.
More of a ramp, the dialogue that we had before. But so to your point, John, I think that it's about perception. From the economists that I've heard, there's going to be long-term economic and workforce scarring, especially for women and people of color. And so, and what we know is that the key to our long-term economic growth involves really investing in those groups. And so if we hold a special spotlight on it, it's like, before the Tubbs fire, there was a housing problem. Well, before COVID, there was a childcare problem. And I think we've done a pretty good job as a council of keeping in mind that the housing problem, persists, even though we've rebuilt most of our stock. We're doing everything we can. And so I think that if we can hold childcare like that, and I have this vision of, this is going to sound crazy, but of one day having, childcare like in the form of summer camps throughout the city of Santa Rosa, and that they're all based on ability to pay, and that we might not be able to, in one fell swoop, solve the housing crisis, but what an attractive place to live and work would Santa Rosa be if between the school systems and the city park and rec department, that you had a safe place to put your child year round, and that we would really become even more of an economic powerhouse. So I know I get really excited, and I would apologize for it, but I think that it's really important. So
no, it's a beautiful vision. It's a beautiful vision. Universal childcare. Why not, right? And what it means to our labor force. I mean, especially for myself in District 1, where we do have a large population of laborers. I mean, this would definitely answer the question that's been at the forefront pre-COVID. So it definitely answers a lot of the needs that my community in District 1 has. So no, definitely, it's a beautiful vision, and I would love to work alongside of each of you to attain that, especially with contribution from businesses, and really understanding that we're actually, as business owners, we're profiting from our labor force not having to deal with this extra cost or extra issues every morning when it comes to our child care.
Well, we used and summer camps, I remember going to summer camp here in Santa Rosa, and I think that I'm not sure if there's that much focus currently on summer camps. I'm not sure about the age requirements. I mean, what the challenges might be, but I remember having a great time. And even though we were probably a little bit older, and I'm not sure what age group we can create a summer. I'm sure that something could be created that will attract kids of a younger age. So I think that I love the idea, and I think it's something that we could continue to look at as one of the options, because it's that time of the year, and those summer camps, regardless of the age of the child, can be something that can be life-changing. If nothing else, a great memory maker. So I think we should pursue it.
Okay, so City Attorney Burke had mentioned that obviously if all three of you are going out and doing work, then it would be covered under the Brown Act. But if individually or two of you are doing something and we bring it back to the committee, then that works. And so listening to this conversation, which is inspiring, I think the main things are, as we develop this program, so staff will come back to vet these program development elements here to the subcommittee, but the big questions are leveraging the funds, leveraging the political support. And I think that's where I'm hearing you guys are willing to play in that space. and doing so in conjunction with the supervisors. Another thing that's interesting, Councilmember Fleming, being on the red, because one of the second phase pieces of this program is, again, that new facility development and rehabilitation. We're not only just losing the providers, but we're losing the spaces that are eligible for people to be in, given the state requirements. And so that's that other piece of it. So we'll bring that back to you guys. And I captured the vision of universal childcare, and let's work towards that. And our recreation department summer camps are included in opportunities that we're pursuing. So the next one is, it's more straightforward. It's the pursuit of revenue opportunities. The one thing that we're pursuing at this point through the, which will go through council, is the formation of an enhanced infrastructure finance district. So I'm not sure if that's going to go through this committee. I have a feeling it's more would go through the long-term finance subcommittee. But I just want you to be aware that there are elements or sort of sub-projects from an EIFD that we'll be tracking because that infrastructure finance district affects the development of the areas in which we form that financial district, and that's a tax increment financing effort. But the other thing that we've brought either through the downtown subcommittee or through this subcommittee is the creation of community benefit districts. These are assessment districts. So I've talked with Councilmember Alvarez about this, the potential of something like this in Roseland. Currently, we have one, as you know, in Railroad Square area and downtown area. But my coworker, Rafael Rivero, is looking and working with businesses in the Roseland area to see if we could do that as well, a benefit district there. And this just enables people through a financing mechanism that the city has to participate in, but it enables neighborhoods, usually commercial districts, to have funding to reinvest into their specific district. Stop me if you guys have any questions. The other thing is with our real estate manager, Jill Scott, and with our parking district manager, Kim Nadeau, we've identified city properties in the downtown that aren't part of the public-private partnership for a civic center that we're going to pursue development on. So specifically, we've identified lots 10 and 11, which are the small parking lots on 5th Street and potentially one of the garages in the downtown, to release them to do an RFQ for affordable housing. We have to follow the state Surplus Land Act, and so it's going to be a phased thing, and we'll be bringing that and discussing it through the Economic Development Subcommittee for what that development looks like. That merges with the infill development projects, including the exclusive negotiation agreements and the disposition and development agreements. So right now we only have one ENA with Cornerstone Properties on Lot 2, which is the lot behind the Press Democrat building. We're really fast tracking to get that done in the next 6 months. So that's something that's also going to be coming back here. Roseland initiatives, we met with Councilmember Alvarez. We have a downtown subcommittee, we have an economic development subcommittee. With Roseland being our other sort of main downtown type of area where we have development capacity, I have an interest in having sort of a standing item on Roseland issues here, if it makes sense, because I think we need to begin really putting a concerted effort and focus on development and needs in the Roseland area, similar to how we do with the downtown. And so I just wanted to see how you felt about that being vetted through this subcommittee.
Well, I'll jump in here. I mean, we have a subcommittee, or we have what we have highlighted Railroad Square. We have naturally highlighted the downtown because it is the virtual and physical core of the city. But I think that we are well beyond the time of necessity to have a bright light shining on Roseland. It is a cultural center. It's like it would be. I can't imagine the city of San Francisco not shining a bright light on Chinatown, and I can't imagine the city of Santa Rosa not shining a bright light on Roseland. It deserves that kind of attention. Now, where to focus that, how exactly, what kind of body is best used so that they can be nimble and be able to quickly identify the priorities for that area. I think it's a natural. It's our Latin Quarter, and it's a natural to have some great attention paid to that. Not in addition to the annexations, I think that it's a natural to pay particular attention to that district. It'll do nothing but help the residents and the business owners of that area and the entire city.
What could I possibly add to that? And very well stated. And it's absolutely, in my opinion, the fastest growing economic sector of Santa Rosa. And you're absolutely right, John. As a Santa Rosan, I would love to see every sector of Santa Rosa be the strongest it could possibly be economically, culturally, so we can all be stronger together. So thank you for those comments.
You bet. Victoria.
Oh, can't add to that. I agree with what you both said.
Yeah. So the question is going to be what to implement. What is because it's kind of getting the what do you call it, the DDAs or the ENAs, not
the community
ENAs.
benefit districts.
Yeah, the benefit districts can be laborious, and I'm wondering how do we kick it off without waiting for while we are assuming there's a desire to have it. I mean, you've got to determine the desire, but in the meantime, how do we best shine that light on what that community is asking for as far as priority? And then we would need to, first of all, ascertain that, what are the needs, and then allow those most affected to prioritize them, and then allow this subcommittee to help implement and have a broader conversation with 3 council members.
I'm sorry.
There's no. I just am adding because I realized, John, when you called on me earlier, you were asking a question, and I don't have the exact answer. I do think that hopefully that the body of work for that lies in this group, because but I do think that we ought to be thinking about the right strategy and the right rollout, and almost having like a coming out party or something, some sort of, not like a specific event, but like a promotion or an unveiling or some sort of effort around this. And maybe it can coincide with when things start to open up a little bit more in the fall, about like rediscover, Roseland's wonderful as it is. It's not like, anybody's discovered it, but making sure that it gets the same love and attention in a way that fits Roseland.
And we might be able, so I can work with Raphael on developing what this called out item on our economic development subcommittee agenda looks like, because there are certain things like he spent a lot of time working on mobile vending, for example, and micro entrepreneurship and creative reuse of space out there. So there are current things like how do you keep the economy or access to the economy going during COVID, or what was lacking in terms of policy that are specific to that area where the infrastructure looks different. So, as I'm thinking about this and hearing you, it's like, I like this idea of sort of I don't know, announcing that, you know, we've got something going, that we're putting this presence there, but then it's looking at the surface needs and then digging deeper, because I think over time it's a question of infrastructure. It's a question of how over the next number of years we're looking at some of the land issues that are there, because it's not been invested in for so long. And I think that's going to be, as we develop that or we talk about it, we can hit the surface needs and then the underlying needs. And I think it's the question of identifying the underlying needs, and then how does that look within a broader city work plan. Because I do think you guys will probably end up having to talk about that in maybe not this year's priority setting, but next year's priority setting, for example.
And there's a lot of great points being made. And I wish I had more experience as a councilman and really in local government to ascertain a better plan. But the truth is, I would definitely be depending on my fellow council members to educate me on the resources that are available to the community. And I believe that the coming out, the announcement that it's a new day is a phenomenal idea, and it's definitely the right timing for that to happen, especially with elections and being really just welcomed into the city of Santa Rosa for the first time ever. So I definitely see the point that we have. Actually, it's a great opportunity for us to really hit that ground running. I just, as a businessman, you'd expect me to know exactly what we want and exactly what we don't want. But it sounds like the word community empowerment is very, very a strong word that really entails what I would want to be the goals to be, and that is really to empower the community. What that means to me is really a lot of meetings that involves the community, even more so than us saying, hey, welcome. I definitely want to sit down with each and every one of my community members to make sure that they're included in the conversation, because that seems to be the biggest deterrent from involvement in the past, is not feeling welcomed or included or listened to within the community. So it's definitely a lot of listening sections that I see in my future here.
And you know, the beginning part of that, I mean, there was a lot of community outreach during the annexation conversations, and I think there may be, we could probably glean a fair amount, even though now the information is several years old. I think there are probably some continuing issues and needs that were well identified during the annexation process that could help us at least begin those conversations. So we're not starting from square one. We've got a lot of information about how the community in Roseland saw their future. And I think we need to, wherever we can, take advantage of the information that was provided during that I think it was a pretty robust public outreach program. So let's, take it off the shelf and relook at that potentially before we, and maybe some things will jump out at us, maybe not, but it would be a great place to start, I think, one way or another.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's interesting is that we annexed it during the fires. Like literally, we were still in the EOC.
Yeah.
And the annexation happened. And then, that the rebuild, et cetera, it took a long time. I think, the other thing that's interesting to me is that, so again, if we look at the downtown, including Railroad Square and the Courthouse Square areas, they have direct access to 3 council members through the downtown subcommittee. This would be that access to a committee for those businesses as well, or for those residents as well. And I think that's sort of, I think that'll be helpful.
Yeah. And, COVID has also changed the landscape. So there may be some things that are going to bubble up to the surface now that weren't bubbling up during the annexation. And I think we need to be mindful of that. Even if some of these things are temporary, I think we need to be remembering where we are today as opposed to where we were during the fires, and take advantage of wherever we can of the information, but also understand that there will be new challenges and issues that need to be discussed before coming up with a game plan.
Yeah, and I just want to add, because, you know, Councilor Alvarez, I mean, we're also making it up as we go along. We will develop this together and discover the tools together. Eileen, just so you know, your email is online. Yeah. So we'll develop that jointly. I think Rafael and I will take the first crack at sort of like, how do we define this? Or he's out there all the time. He has weekly meetings, multiple meetings each week, I think, with business organizations and residents of that area. And we can figure out with the community and through you as well, how to roll that out.
So, and
Sounds
Rafael
great.
Rivero is definitely my dad's best friend since about 5 years ago, if not maybe even more. So anything, hey, well, where's Rafael? I don't know, Dad.
You and me both. I'm like, if you know Rafael, I work with him. That's how I always say. But that's how. So on some of these other things, again, that mobile vending and the out there program, we identified that there's not equal access to some of the policies that we're implementing that might be good for so many other places, but again, because the infrastructure is not equal out there, it's just different. We weren't able to implement some of these things. So we're going to continue doing like the out there SR inside out there program. So we've got, that's web-based. Go ahead.
Would it be possible to, you know, when you guys started talking about Rafael, I just had a little light bulb go off about that beautiful event that that you guys put on, that he really spearheaded in our courtyard for the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
Thinking about, you know, as we, maybe one aspect of as we shine this light, and it sounds like there's some consensus around this is a good economic initiative, but also just sort of picking up on, you know, a lot of things got the bandwidth from the Tubbs fire really sort of probably pushed aside some of the welcoming that we would have done. And so that event made me think about like, well, what other ways can we bring, you know, do more things like that, but also perhaps when we can have events in person, what it would be like to have like some subcommittee meetings in Roseland community spaces. And to, you know, because I don't think we've ever as a city done that. You know, sometimes like boards and commissions will meet at Finley Center or whatever, but would it be possible for us to, I don't know what space exactly, but to have this meeting be, why not have this meeting be held in Roseland on a quarterly basis? Or
I love that idea. I mean, or even like I had this idea of like ages ago, I mean, years and years and years ago, which was like, I mean, I think they have to be announced as special meetings so that we can say where they are, because otherwise they're usually in the same place. But we should be out in the community and to have a greater access. We've elevated Rafael to this. I don't know, Rafael, if you have anything to add or any thoughts on that, but otherwise we will continue to work together on that. But yes, I think we should be out in the community.
That's a great idea. I even hope that one day we can have a city council meeting in Roseland, and that definitely builds off your comment, Victoria. I would love to see that happen, and it's really a testament to the people that government is there, and we're inviting everybody to participate. It's ever so important.
yeah, it's hard for me to see why it wouldn't be, you know, advantageous, but then again, I, you know, come up with a lot of ideas that don't in the end seem advantageous. So we'll see.
I think this would be though.
Okay.
I think this would be great. I mean, Rafael, do you want to give an example, like when you pulled in the county and did, even in COVID, we had an outdoor safe community meeting. Do you want to talk about that?
Really quick. So I think everyone there is just hungry for a greater connection, a greater engagement. So definitely, I think they will welcome the idea. I think it's long overdue. I believe we can find a particular spot where we can hold some of these meetings, some of these gatherings, etc. But the collaboration between the county and the Mitote group and the city was just tremendous. And I'm really glad that it came together in unity under the pandemic and under the restrictions, under the where we had to disinfect all the chairs and tables, but we had a gathering there. We provided a training to the food vendor operators on how to get their permits and such, and how to go through the process, so there wouldn't be any confusion. But what I really enjoyed was just the connection with the county folks, as well as the other 10 entities involved, and we made it happen. So working together, good understanding, communication, and that expectation that we were there just to improve the process, which was really was the beautiful outcome of it. And just out of that outcome, we've been having regular meetings with county folks where our planners are involved, where Bill is involved, where other folks are involved. And where there's one coming up where they want to do a follow-up on the Mitote outdoor dining project. They want an update on the farmers market. And we also are working with I'm also working with Andrew Triple and Monet on a brochure to provide that comprehensive education to the vendors. And the brochure is going to be both in English and Spanish. And it's just another form of engagement that we're producing out of the effort from just being out there, getting to know the businesses and the community, and building that trust, which is greatly needed.
I think the biggest takeaway for us is, again, access is critical. And we talk a lot in the city, or like in the world right now, about, diversity, equity, and inclusion, but access, you don't have any of it if you don't have access. And so that is what we're trying to address in these ways. So.
And that does fall on my shoulders. Now as a newly elected and representative of the area, it's really shown the people of District 1 that there is a reason for them to come out and speak up,
yeah,
that there is someone that's listening. So it does fall on my shoulders.
Yeah, and you're not alone. We are there to support you on this. Okay, so
and I do want to make sure that we do it face to face, because if
right.
Otherwise, I mean, we could, we could say we're in Roseland right now, and who'd know we weren't. So it's kind of, we need our faces in this whatever, however it takes to get that meeting together. And Rafael, when you're out in the community, be looking around for great spaces, maybe the one you used before, so that we can do this with the proper social distancing, but have our bodies in Roseland, not just our heads.
Yes.
And then ongoing, I absolutely love the idea, Councilmember Fleming, of being out there, having special meetings, and not just in Roseland, but in other areas as well, showing up. I think it's great. Just to get off the slide, we do have ongoing COVID response stuff. Again, Rafael's leading the Latinx community recovery and communication elements of it. We're continuing to address right-of-way use options. You guys, I think, the very first meeting of the year was waiving or reducing fees related to having to move businesses outside. And this open and out, the outdoor dining, I know Councilmember Fleming would like to see 4th Street closed down every year in the summer, but those are the kinds of ideas that are interesting, that we hope to have a life outside of our COVID response. Next slide. Next slide, Eileen. Let me see if I can adjust. Oh, there we go. Up, no, one back. There, parking lot items. Okay, so on these, so we receive a lot of interest or inquiries or ideas from all sorts of areas. And so what we realized in the Economic Recovery Task Force is the best way to capture this, acknowledge it, is to just keep a running list. And, to be honest with you, some of the things bubbled up or down depending on feasibility. And so these are some of those things. So I just want to acknowledge, especially because some of these came from other council members, that we do hear them. And if you see anything on this, depending on capacity of staff, we can move things around. It's not like the first slide is where we are forever. So the parking lot idea, so a lot of it is pending funding. So there was a request to have, for example, the working capital for small businesses. This is something that actually the state and the county have stepped up on. The county in particular funded a grant program specifically geared toward minority-owned businesses that tended to be left out a little bit more of the state and federal grants. The state also recognized that the access to their grants was a little bit lopsided towards the large businesses. So in this one, we have not had the funds or found the funds to do a working capital for small business program within the city. So it remains on the parking lot. We're not opposed to it, but we have found that other jurisdictions or that the county and the state have been stepping into that. Vacant space activation. We're constantly looking at this idea. It's on the parking lot because we haven't, other than the Mercado, where in Roseland the old Dollar Tree was reused and repurposed. That's kind of the ideal of what we'd like to do, but we had a willing partner with the county, who is the landlord. The idea behind this is to activate the streetscape. We know that there are a number of businesses that have been closed down, but how do we use those closed businesses in an interim fashion, or even just to do the facade or storefront, somehow activate those. It doesn't necessarily need money, so I didn't say it's pending funding, but it's an interesting idea that pops up when we get an opportunity. Tenant improvement is something that does need funding. We brought this up in our regional economic development meeting. I know Windsor's looking at it, but this is grants or low interest loans to help either rehabilitate or to do some kind of new program for businesses at either the facade or interior tenant programs. We have tried to have programs like this when we had redevelopment. They're complex. I had an interview with somebody who was doing a master's thesis on this issue. So if it's something that comes up, it is a large program area, and we'd have to really figure out how to do that. A business incubator or fab lab. We used to have a makerspace. That makerspace closed down. I've been talking with a couple of businesses who have an interest in doing something similar, especially around manufacturing. I think if we can get a little bit more time for the ED staff, we can pursue a partnership on something like this. It doesn't necessarily have to be through a school or a single business, but it's an idea that there is a general interest in the business community. Policy and regulation development for emerging industries. We've kept this one on. We saw opportunities around early on around repatriate, bringing offshore businesses back in, especially for manufacturing. What opportunities exist around this? I think this one we're looking more through the general plan process. If there are opportunities to look at how, what industries might be growing and where we might be able to align it with land use or, whatever opportunities within Santa Rosa or Sonoma County. Partner programs, this has been brought up to us a few times. We do, Raphael sits on the Workforce Investment Board. We take a rather passive role in training or retraining workers re-entering the economy. But we keep this on because if there's an opportunity for us to play a larger role, we're obviously always interested. Similarly with the COVID working conditions, we haven't identified any, but at this point, but an offshoot of this, for example, was the paid sick leave. So those are ideas, sort of broad ideas in that way. What needs to be addressed specific to the pandemic or even outside of the pandemic that the city from a policy standpoint could play a role in. The Downtown Preservation and Economic Protection Plan, this came from one of our council members who proposed a $75 a month fee for any landlord that had a property owner that has a vacant storefront. And the idea for that was to use those funds to help support a recruitment and retention programs of businesses. You know, to be honest with you, I don't know how much money that would bring in, or the value of that. We have started working with the Chamber of Commerce more aggressively and the Downtown Action Organization specifically on identifying and pursuing businesses to take over vacant storefronts. But running a program that has a fee associated with it has some complications, but it's on here. We could certainly look into it if it rose up. And then a policy to the latest one, it came up early on in the pandemic and then was brought up at a recent council meeting, again from a fellow council person, is the question of capping the percentages charged by food delivery services. We've only heard this request from one business so far, but we do know that, for example, San Francisco's done it, a couple other businesses have done it, and that's like Uber Eats, or those types of things that they charge 15%. It's not particularly advantageous to our local businesses, but we haven't heard it in the Economic Development Division as a growing concern, but we're not opposed to looking at that policy. So those are the things that are left over from the task force that remain on our list. Are there any questions on that?
I do have a question. It's a concern, actually. The Economic Preservation, Economic Protection Plan, the $75. You mentioned, you're not really sure how much it would generate. What I do know, it would generate a fair amount of anger, and I think it feels almost insulting to me to have. And I understand. I know where I don't even remember which council member brought it up. I understand what they're thinking about is that if it's going to be an empty space, it needs to be maintained properly. How can we make sure that it's not unattractive? Malls use their own ways of. They actually hide the fact that there's an empty space, but that's in a mall environment. And I'm just wondering who's doing this and how well is it working for them? And is there another conversation we can have about kind of beautification of empty storefronts without smacking somebody $75 because they can't find a tenant? And so it's rubbing me the wrong way. And I'd like to address the issue of empty storefronts without giving them what is almost like an irritant as opposed to an effective way of dealing with the issue. So I'm wondering if we could delve into this one, either put it on the chalkboard later, put it, what do you call it? It's not a chalkboard, your parking lot.
Yeah.
Put it on the parking lot, but having it sit there, just every time I read it, it just makes me uncomfortable. Well, and maybe because I'm an ex-retailer, it rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, I mean, what we can do is we can actually take this off, and we replace it with, there's maybe an opportunity to work with public art, and see if we can put, at least if we work with the property owners, at least put art in the windows. Again, something similar to what malls do. They board it up in a nice way, or they use the storefront. And the other thing we can do is talk with the Downtown Action Organization, have them sort of expand on what that joint program with them is. So it's identifying, it's working with, because a lot of times staff, we don't know, the neighbor or the business there knows that they're going out or that there'll be a vacancy in their building. So we can expand that, but we can actually take this off.
What do you think, committee members?
Well, first of all, I think that where you're coming from is the right place, that we should use more carrot than stick in this environment, or in this situation. I think that every landlord is a different individual or a different corporation. And so you have some who are flat out not great actors, people who live outside of the area and don't particularly care that a large piece of real estate in the downtown is vacant, and they're just waiting for conditions to change to sell it, or the city's been working with their heirs or whatever, like, you know, like the plan is that person's gonna, you know, pass on, and then their children will be compelled to sell it to somebody who will be compelled to rent it. I mean, and so that's one extreme. And then the other is, you know, somebody who's like has, you know, real challenges in keeping a tenant for logistical reasons or whatever it is, you know. And so, you know, thinking of them all as like responding well to one intervention is probably unrealistic. Where, you know, some of them, you know, like if we just flat out can't get some cranky old man, you know, in Marin to rent or sell his building, could we at the very least entice him to let, you know, like let's say it's on 4th Street, let the neighboring business use this space in front as a parklet or some, you know, or sidewalk dining or an expansion thereof. And then, you know, for the ones who are, you know, more earnest and trying, but have genuine challenges, you know, getting in there, like Raisa said, that they're already trying to do with the Chamber of Commerce and helping to identify potential tenants and the kinds of businesses. And that sounds like that's already happening. And then, you know, the third piece would be like the art for the temporary situations. But I do believe that there are these, you know, more difficult and intractable, only profit motivated. I mean, all landlords are going to be profit motivated, which is not a bad thing, but some who are profit motivated to the point of not being concerned about our community. And those people I'd like to see us have some, you know, some sort of way to deal with. And I don't know what the answer is short of a fee or a fine, but I don't think that somebody who's waiting to see their investment go from $3 to $4 or $5 to $7 million is going to respond much to $75 a month, except to, you know, start an independent expenditure campaign to take us down or something.
And that's a great point. I mean, it is $75, but I agree with John. It's that little thorn in the side. Had this not been a pandemic environment, I would laugh and agree with this. But even on this economic recovery work plan, on the parking lot, we see working capital for small businesses. We see vacant spaces activation, tenant improvement pilot programs, and we see one detriment to a landlord. So it's really the economy that we're in, and I would actually see the $75 as something laughable, but it would be more the thorn in the side, an environment that I have no control over. And for that reason, I would definitely advocate for removing that $75 a month, and then in the future bring it back if needed. But in this current environment, I can't see that as being a tool that will promote economic recovery.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and it's not to lose sight of our need to mitigate empty storefronts. I think we've got to. I think we still need to come up with something. They've tried it over the years. I think they've tried every idea known to man or woman to figure out a way to make empty storefronts that have been empty for literally 15 years. My business was right next to one of them, or very close to one of them, and they've just got the tenant improvements were so expensive they couldn't rent it. But that didn't mean that they couldn't use it. They finally did. It is being used. It's finally being occupied after all these years. But I don't want it. I don't want the concept to fall off the edge. I just want this strategy to be something else that might work a little better.
And I agree with that. For me, it's really the timing of the environment that we're in right now. But if we're hearing that something's been vacant for 5 years because a tenant is waiting for that grandparent to die for the inheritance, it's only being a negative impact on the surrounding businesses that are having that vacant lot accrue webs in the window storefront, and that's not proper for any outlook for a business community.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, so then we'll, I think what I'm hearing is I can just link it more effectively with vacant space activation and sort of take away that $75 a month. I mean, we can put it in the back of our minds, but really put it towards the vacant space activation concept.
Race, I don't know if there's a limit that we could. I mean, again, I'm thinking once COVID is gone. I mean, even if it's a 5% of whatever the fair market value or of the lease, even that is a penalty. And then we start seeing landlords that will look at the 5% and maybe give it as a 5% discount to a potential tenant. There's nothing worse in a shopping center than an empty space. But right now in the COVID era, I would disagree with it. But no COVID, I definitely would want to pressure landlords to fill up spaces, and that's for the good of the entire strip mall. And I'm thinking of a mall in this, or a strip mall in this case.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And I know there are programs that we can look at when that time comes to see. Okay. So that was it for that item. We went through all of the efforts, and thank you very much for I got some good notes out of that, and I think
I should probably call for public comment. Do we have, Eileen, do we have anyone from the community that would like to speak on item 3.1?
We do not have any raised hands at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's go ahead and go to 3.2, Raisa.
Okay. This one, Eileen, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So this one is our business tax, how we're doing on our, what did I say? Oh, it's our 2020 Q3 sales tax. Just super high level. As you can expect, our sales tax is really down. We are not doing Santa Rosa in terms of our sales taxes lower, isn't bouncing back as well as Sonoma County is or statewide is. And again, just as a reminder, we lag when on our reports for sales tax is 6 months behind. So this is Q3, we'll understand where we are Q4. You know, there was a rally, of course, around Christmas and Q4 or the holiday season, but it's been tenuous. I will say the thing that is saving us is a bit of an overstatement, but the online sales and our portion that we get back from online sales has been somewhat stable, and it's thankfully a few years ago there was the Wayfair Act where we used to not get local sales tax, didn't come back to us if people were purchasing online, and it does come back to us now. Year over year, I think it is a 12% decline from where we are. Obviously, general retail, transportation, and food products were hit hard. I will say we've always done really well in auto sales, new and used auto sales. We've been higher or on the higher end throughout the state. That has finally been, and we were anticipating that to reduce a little bit. Again, our new and used sales, car sales has reduced a little bit as well. And so even those aren't doing very well in this economy. Let's see, construction is the one area that we see as somewhat stable. If you've been listening to any of the regional economic reports or even statewide reports from some of the economists coming out, the housing market has remained stable, and for us, construction remains stable up here. But that is the high, just very high level. We're down, we're not bouncing up quite as well, but our online sales tax has been helpful.
I have a question.
Please.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
I'm just curious to know, Marisa, what you think. You know, I'm looking at this chart, and what's actually most striking to me is what was going on in 2019. You see the what I imagine is like the Christmas bump from Q1, which is the high point on the chart. And then it just starts plummeting essentially into the pandemic, but a year ahead of time. Do we have an understanding of what's going on there?
I have to look back because I did do a report out, and I just, you know, to be honest with you, I didn't look back at this point. I can't remember, but I can tell you next time because I did look into it. I just can't remember.
Okay.
The issue.
Yeah, I just think it's really interesting because what you see is like in Q3 of 2020, you know, you're almost back to where you were at Q1, you know, pre-pandemic. So
yeah. Yeah, let me go back because I do have notes on that, and because what I ended up doing too on this was looking at area by area, and I think we had delved into downtown, kind of like where were our hotspots, and how were they performing year over year in those quarters. So let me go back.
Yeah, and I know that, Santa Rosa, that sales tax is just one portion of our revenue. And I know this is more of a long-term finance wheelhouse, but it would be interesting at some point to see one of those slides. I've seen them before, like the pie chart of like where our different revenues come in and, what portion of that is sales tax. I'm sure John knows all this stuff inside and out, but it'd be interesting to see that so we can understand like why, our Santa Rosa line might lag behind the state and the county, but that we're doing other things or, where we want to go in terms of our economic development efforts in balancing our portfolio of incomes.
Eileen, can you go to the next slide, please?
Did you have that next?
No, I don't.
I'm like, can you produce a report and then it just magically appears?
No, I just threw just the most basic things. Our Deputy Director of Finance, Alan Alton, is on. If he wants to raise his hand, we can elevate him. But I think we'd have to go back and take a look at that and maybe have him. I can have him sort of help us give a better overview looking back, because I remember in 2019 we did have a discussion about this, and like I said, I did look into it.
What's interesting too is that we weren't alone. Everyone, they all pretty much followed the same, within reason, followed the same curve. So what was happening to us was happening countywide and in the state. So, and I'm glad you asked the question, Victoria, because once I became aware of it and really looked at it, it's an oddity that I would like it. I'd love to hear the explanation to that. And then we'll all go, oh yeah, of course. But it'd be good. It'll be great to hear it.
If I may, it really sounds like this was a time period that really the houses started selling again in Coffee Park, and in the rebuilt fires, the inventory started coming back on. So it wouldn't surprise me at all. Some furniture was one of the best sellers as people were trying to replenish the couches that they had lost during the fire, so to speak. But when it comes to the car sales, I mean, in District 1, that's one of our highest producers as well the marketplace. And I can't really say that at the end of 2019. If he had told me at the end of 2020, I would have said everybody was back out in the open after being quarantined, and they were more than happy to go shopping and spend their money. But that's not the case here, is it?
I might even be able to do. We used to have a map on GIS that had sales tax hotspots, and you could see where things were. Let me talk with our GIS folks and see if I can get that as well. Are there any other sort of economic indicator things that you'd be interested in seeing as we look into this?
The next time it'd be interesting to see, when you answer that question, if you could back it up a couple more years, just on the chart, because maybe it just looks like that, like all the time,
Yeah. Okay. It certainly is compressed. So I will do that. All right. Well, that's all that I had. I'm sorry I don't have, too much information on it. I didn't dig too deep. I just want to let you know, look, we have some of the initial Q3 information, and I can go deeper. That's it. I think that's our last item, Councilmember.
One last thing I wanted to say on that last one, the slide that's up right now, is that, we are not, we're not trailing nearly as badly as the region or the state.
Right.
In our total, sector. So that gives me some hope.
Yeah, and it's good to remember too that that Sonoma County, we're pretty diversified up here. I think more so than people think, because they hear mostly about tourism, and yes, tourism is a huge factor in our economy, but we're more diversified, I think, than that statement would lead you to believe.
if I may, in the historical reports that Victoria is asking for, it's if we can incorporate, and I don't know how you go about doing this, but really how the fire has affected those numbers, both in construction, sales tax revenue from our local hardware stores and that type of thing. If there's any way to incorporate how the fires affect.
Yeah, I can. I mean, I will tell you that when we looked into this during the fires, again, I'm sort of going way back in my mind, and by way back, I just mean pre-pandemic, when I had better memory of it. We actually were really stable after, from an economic perspective, after the fires. I mean, obviously construction was up, and that was a leading indicator. People were replenishing, like you pointed out. So we actually, from a sales tax, as I recall, did pretty well after that. And that's one of the things. That could be that, when we were doing the rebuild, that you hit a peak and then it began going down. I just can't remember what the notes were from that time.
Alan has his hand up, so maybe.
Eileen, can you promote Alan? Hey, Alan.
Hello. So I'm trying to remember, what was the question about the percentage of sales tax to the whole? Was that?
No, the question was on the sales tax revenue reports that you see a steep decline starting at the beginning of from the peak of the beginning of 2019.
Right.
A year, we would have, imagined that it would have started at the beginning of the pandemic, but the slide really started before that.
Yeah. So, so I did hear that one, and I don't have a good answer for that. We will need to do some research. I did notice, or we noticed that that in the quarter right before the pandemic, we were starting to see a slight decline. That could have been from auto sales. We've been waiting for the auto sales bubble to burst, so to speak, in our area for some time, and it just never happens. We're very fortunate that we have a strong base in that regard. Plus, we have CarMax, so we kind of, if new car sales go down, we're kind of hedged with used car sales there. But we can go into a further.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that, Alan. And the reason why is not just out of like pure curiosity, although I will admit to just being generally curious. It's because, these trends on the graph mirror state and county trends. That's not just, about us here regionally, and also because they predate COVID. If there's I've heard from multiple economists that our economy is generally fundamentally strong, even though this is disproportionately impacted, certain groups, more vulnerable groups more than others, but that the foundation of our economy is in a good space. And so I'm wondering, if there's any vulnerabilities or weak points that we need to address through this or our colleagues over in long-term finance, so that, we don't end up with a blind spot.
Right. Yeah. And we will be going over a lot of this in the finance subcommittee I think in March. We're scheduled to do a revision or to present a revision of the long-range financial forecast, and then bring that to the full council in April. Okay. So that'll be our real next chance to look at trends. We should by that time have we should be able to at that time go back and research exactly what the trends were heading before the pandemic and now.
Well, I think that to the degree that it's possible to have an abbreviated version of those presentations in this group doesn't need and poor John has it over there too. But
Yeah.
this group doesn't need like the full thing, but we need just enough to inform the decisions on economic development policy.
No, I totally understand that. Just wasn't really prepared to do that for
Oh,
this meeting.
that's fine. And this is
Absolutely
just
do it.
kind of a wish list thing going forward, because I feel like today's kind of been this synergistic meeting of figuring out where we're going to go and how we're going to get there. So
Yeah.
no expectation that it would have been done today.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, a lot of what, to kind of echo to what Raisa said earlier is that we are fortunate in that online sales have kept us afloat, if you will. Sales tax is about, 30, a little more than 30% of our revenue budget in the general fund, and property tax is around 20%. So you're looking at about half of our revenue comes from property tax and sales tax in the general fund. Our property tax is strong. Our property values remain strong. So that's a firm revenue source for us. And where the volatility is in sales tax, and which is why we try to diversify our revenue portfolio as much as possible. And all I can say is that if that Wayfair decision wasn't in place and we weren't able to reap sales tax revenues from online sales, we would be in a horrible situation right now. But they're still low. They're still below our estimates. But as they said at the state, the last meeting I attended, they're bad, but they're not as horrible as they thought it was going to be. So it's some hope.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Alan.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
So I think I'll ask the public if they would like to weigh in or have any questions on 3.2, the 2020 Q3 sales tax report overview. Do we have anyone, Eileen?
We do not have any raised hands at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll just move on to the next agenda, which is talking about the next agenda.
Yeah, so I think if I'll work with Alan, if we can have some kind of version of that, we'll look back at the history. We'll definitely have that on the next agenda.
Okay.
Okay. And the other one was the Roseland. We'll try to flesh out what that looks like on the agenda moving forward.
And if you don't, I think we really should not anticipate not meeting. What would be our next meeting date, Raisa?
The second Tuesday, which is March 9th.
Okay. So what I'm wondering is if we review what information you've been able to gather. I don't want to spin people's wheels, but I also want them to know that we're dedicated to having regular meetings. But if there is truly a gap in the information that we've asked for, that you just haven't been able to get it to put it together, or something happens in the interim, I don't want to spin the council's wheels or staff's wheels coming up with a meeting just to say we had one.
I appreciate
that. So just keep us posted. We'll know what to anticipate as we're scheduled to have one in the beginning of March, and if we need to delay for some reason and have a more a more effective meeting in April, then so be it.
Okay.
If the committee's okay with that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that, except for the thing that we around emergency paid sick leave and tracking the hopefully coming soon the COVID relief package, and what provisions, if any, might be in that for those tax credits that we said we would track. So
and that would be a reason to definitely to come together. So
okay. I'll make sure to have that, because I can give you an update in the meantime if I hear anything otherwise, but for sure we would want to vet any extension at that March meeting.
Right. Well, especially if I mean, because we had the EPSL go with the tax credit. So if they're extended, then I don't know that we'll need to take action, but we might need to review. But if they are not extended, that would be an inflection or a decision point for us.
Right. Okay. All right. I think then there's at least 3 things on the agenda, with another that I'm sort of thinking about, the vacant space and that question. Okay. Anything else?
I don't think so. Any other staff reports, Raisa, that need to be addressed?
No, this was incredibly helpful, and I'm very, very grateful that you guys are willing to have a merger of a Brown Act meeting with the Economic Task Force, and to be able to have this kind of conversation has been super helpful. Thank you.
Well, it's nice to know that we can have the same kind of efficacy inside this meeting and still have the lack of formality that some subcommittees find it necessary to have. So I prefer to be on first name basis and where appropriate. I know staff has a harder time calling us on by our first names, and I understand that. But I'm being able to have these nimble kind of meetings, I think, is really effective, and it's been effective for us in the past, and I expect it will continue as we move along as a subcommittee as opposed to a task force.
And if it's okay with you, I think in the next ones, we can also elevate any other staff members. So again, that dialogue can be more easily had. So for example, I know City Attorney Burke is on, Claire Hartman, Scott Moon, just in case there are some input that they may want, we can elevate them if that's of interest.
I agree. That was one of the things about the task force that kind of, the thing that that really strikes me, and I'm glad that the feeling came back this time, is how much and this is gonna sound ludicrous, but how much fun we had.
Yeah. It doesn't sound crazy. It was.
We had a lot of fun, but we had a really good time doing it, and I think that it improved the outcomes.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I think that having staff where they feel comfortable participating, I know it's harder when you're live streaming to YouTube and know that people can watch it and so forth. But I really think that, to the degree that we can just let ourselves go with that workshop mentality while being open to the public, I think that it's more effective.
Yeah, it definitely helps staff actually create the programs. I mean, we would never have been where we are with paid sick leave or the child care program had we not had that workshop mentality.
Yeah,
okay.
I agree. And I appreciate everyone embracing that.
Yay.
Yay. Okay, so I'll at this point then we'll adjourn the meeting, and the council members will see you in a few hours.
See you shortly.